Chapter 12, Darkness at Noon. While the Hebrew prophets predicted darkness at noon, what were the other nations expecting as they awaited for the return of Nibiru? To judge by their written records and engraved images, they were expecting the resolution of the gods' conflicts, benevolent times for mankind, and a great theophany. They were in, as we shall see, for an immense surprise. In anticipation of the great event, the cadres of priests observing the skies in Nineveh and Babylon were mobilized to note celestial phenomenon and interpret their omens. The phenomena were meticulously recorded and reported to the kings. Archaeologists have found in the remains of royal and temple libraries tablets with those records and reports that in many instances were arranged according to the subject or the planet they were observing. A well-known collection in which some 70 tablets were combined in antiquity was a series titled Enuma, Anu, Enlil. It reported observations of planets, stars, and constellations classified according to the celestial way of Anu and way of Enlil, encompassing the skies from 30 degrees south all the way to the zenith in the north. The first observations were interpreted by comparing the phenomenon to astronomical records from Sumerian times. Though written in Akkadian, Babylon, and Assyrian language, the observational reports extensively used Sumerian terminology and mathematics and sometimes included a scribal note that they were translated from earlier Sumerian tablets. Such tablets served as astronomical manuals, telling them from past experiences what a phenomenon's oracle meaning was. When the moon in its calculated time is not seen, there will be an invasion of a mighty city. When a comet reaches the path of the sun, field flow will be diminished. An uproar will happen twice. When Jupiter goes with Venus, the prayers of the land will reach the gods. As time went on, the reports were increasingly of observations accompanied by the omen priest's own interpretations. In night, Saturn came near the moon. Saturn is the planet of the sun. This is the meaning. It is favorable to the king. The noticeable change included the paying of particular attention to eclipses. A tablet, now in the British Museum, listing computer-like columns of numbers, served to predict lunar eclipses 50 years in advance. Modern studies have concluded that the change to the new style of topical astronomy took place in the 8th century BCE, when after a period of mayhem and royal upheavals in Babylon and Assyria, the two lands' fates were placed in a new and strong royal hands. Tiglath-Pileser III in Assyria and Nabu-Nassar in Babylonia. Nabu-Nassar, by Nabu protected, was hailed already in antiquity as an innovator and powerhouse in the field of astronomy. One of his first actions was to repair and restore the temple of Shamash in Sippar, the sun god's cult center in ancient Sumer. He also built a new observatory in Babylon, updated the calendar, a heritage from Nippur, and instituted daily reporting to the king of celestial phenomenon and their meaning. It was primarily due to those measures that a wealth of astronomical data shedding light on subsequent events has come to light. Tiglath-Pileser III was also active in his own ways. His annals describe constant military campaigns and boast of captured cities, brutal executions of local kings and nobility, and mass exiles. His role and those of his successors, Shalmaneser V and Sargon II, in the demise of Israel and the exile of its people, the 10th lost tribes, and then the attempt by Sennacherib to seize Jerusalem, were described in the previous chapter. Closer to home, those Assyrian kings were busy annexing Babylonia by taking the hands of Marduk. The next Assyrian king, Esarhaddon, announced that both Ansar and Marduk gave me wisdom, swore oaths in the name of Marduk and Nabu, and started to rebuild the Istigal temple in Babylon. The history books, Esarhaddon is mainly remembered for his successful invasion of Egypt. The invasion proposed, as far as it could be ascertained, was to stop Egyptian attempts to meddle in Canaan and dominate Jerusalem. Noteworthy in the light of subsequent events was the route he chose. Instead of going the shortest way to the southwest, he made a considerable detour and went northward to Haran. There, in the olden temple of the god Sin, Esarhaddon sought the god's blessing to embark on the conquest, and Sin, leaning on a staff and accompanied by Nisku, the divine messenger of the gods, gave his approval. Esarhaddon then did turn southward, sweeping mighty through the lands of the eastern Mediterranean to reach Egypt. Significantly, he detoured away from the prize that Sennacherib failed to seize, Jerusalem. Significantly, too, that invasion of Egypt and the detour away from Jerusalem, as well as Assyria's own eventual fate, had been prophesied by Isaiah decades earlier. Busy geopolitically as Esarhaddon was, he did not neglect the astronomical requirements of those times. With guidance from the gods Shamash and Adad, he erected in Ashur, the city of Assyria's cult center, a house of wisdom, an observatory, and depicted the complete 12-member solar system, including Nibiru, on his monuments. Leading to a more lavish sacred precinct was a new monumental gate built according to the cylinder seal depictions to emulate Anu's gateway on Nibiru. It was a clue to what the return expectations in Assyria were. All those religious political moves suggest that the Assyrians made sure to touch all the bases as far as the gods were concerned, and so by the 7th century BCE, Assyria was ready for the anticipated return of the planet of the gods. Discovered texts, including letters to the king by their chief astronomer, reveal anticipation of an idyllic utopian time. When Nibiru will culminate, the lands will dwell securely. Hostile kings will be at peace. The gods will receive prayers and hear supplications. When the planet of the throne of heaven will grow brighter, there will be floods and rains. When Nibiru attains its perigee, the gods will give peace. Troubles will be cleared up, complications will be unraveled. Clearly, the expectation was of a planet that will appear, rise in the skies, grow bigger, and at its perigee, at the crossing, become Nibiru, the cross planet. And as the gateway and other construction indicated, with the returning planet, a repeat of the previous visit to Earth by Anu was expected. It was now up to the astronomer priests to watch the heavens for the planetary appearance. But where were they to look in the celestial expanse, and how would they recognize the planet when still in the distant skies? The next Assyrian king, Ashurbanipal, came up with a solution. Historians consider Ashurbanipal to have been the most scholarly of the Assyrian kings, for he had learnt other languages besides Akkadian, including Sumerian, and claimed that he could even read writings from before the flood. He also boasted that he learnt the secret signs of heavens and earth. He studied the heavens with the masters of divination. Some modern researchers also considered him to have been the first archaeologist, for he systematically collected tablets from sites that were already ancient in his time, like Nippur, Uruk, and Sippar in what used to be Sumer. He also sent specialized teams to sort out and loot such tablets from the capitals that the Assyrians overran. The tablets ended up in a framed library where teams of scribes studied, translated, and copied chosen texts from the previous millennia. A visitor to the Museum of Ancient Near East in Istanbul can see a display of such tablets neatly arranged on the original shelves, which each shelf headed by a catalog tablet that lists all the text on that shelf. While the subjects in the accumulated tablets covered a wide range, what was found indicates that particular attention was given to celestial information. Among the purely astronomical texts, there were tablets that belonged to a series titled The Day of Bel, the Day of the Lord. In addition, epic tales and histories pertaining to the gods' comings and goings were deemed important, especially if they shed light on Nibiru's passages. In Numa Elish, the epic of creation that told how the invading planet joined the solar system to become Nibiru, was copied, translated, and recopied. So were writings dealing with the Great Flood, such as the Atrahasis epic and the Epic of Gilgamesh. While they all seem to legitimately be a part of accumulating knowledge in a royal library, it so happened that they all dealt with instances of Nibiru's appearance in the past, and thus with the next nearing. Among the purely astronomical texts translated and undoubtedly carefully studied were guidelines for observing Nibiru's arrival and for recognizing it on its appearance. A Babylonian text that retained the original Sumerian terminology stated, "Planet of the god Marduk, upon its appearance Shol-pe-i, rising 30 degrees Sag-me-nig, when it stands in the middle of the sky Nibiru." While the first named planet, Shol-pe-i, is deemed to be Jupiter, but could be Saturn, the next one's name, Sag-me-nig, could just be a variant for Jupiter, but is considered by some to be Mercury. A similar text from Nippur rendering the Sumerian planetary names as Umun-pa-udu and Sagme-gar suggests that the arrival of Nibiru will be announced by the planet Saturn, and after rising 30 degrees will be near Jupiter. Other texts, the tablet known as K3124, state that after passing Shol-pe-i and Sugme-gar, which I believe means Saturn and Jupiter, planet Marduk will enter the sun, reach perigee, closest to the sun, and become Nibiru. Other texts provide clear clues to regard Nibiru's path as well as to the time frame for its appearance. From the station of Jupiter, the planet passes towards the west. From the station of Jupiter, the planet increases in brilliance, and in the zodiac of Cancer will become Nibiru. The great planet, at his appearance dark red, the heaven he divides in half, as it stands in Nibiru. Taken together, the astronomical text from the time of Ashurbanipal described a planet appearing from the solar system's edge, rising and becoming visible when it reaches Jupiter or even Saturn before that, and then curving down toward the ecliptic. At its perigee, when it's closest to the sun and thus to Earth, the planet at the crossing becomes Nibiru in the zodiac of Cancer. That is, the enclosed schematic and not the scale diagram shows, could happen only when sunrise on the day of the spring equinox took place in the age of the Ram, during the zodiacal age of Aries. Such clues regarding the orbital path of the celestial lord and its reappearance, sometimes using the constellations as a celestial map, are also found in biblical passages, thereby revealing knowledge that must have been internationally available. "In Jupiter will thy face be seen," states Psalm 17. "The Lord from the south shall come. His shining splendor will beam as light." Predicted the prophet Habakkuk, "Alone he stretches about the heavens and treads. Upon the highest deep he arrives at the great bear, Sirius and Orion, and the constellation of the south." The book of Job stated that the prophet Amos foresaw the celestial Lord, smiling his face upon Taurus and Aries, from Taurus to Sagittarius he shall go. These verses describe the planet that spans the highest heavens and orbiting clockwise, retrograde, astronomers say arrives via the southern constellation. It is a trajectory on a vaster scale akin to that of Halley's Comet. A telling clue in regard to Ashurbanipal's expectations was the meticulous rendering into Akkadian of Sumerian descriptions of ceremonies attending the state visit of Anu and Antu to Earth circa 4000 BCE. The sections dealing with their stay in Europe describe how, at eve time, an observer was stationed on the topmost stage of the tower to watch for and announce the appearance of the planets one after the other until the planet of the great Anu of heaven came into view, whereupon all the gods assembled to welcome the divine couple, recited the composition. "To the one who grows bright, the heavenly planet of the god Anu," and sang the hymn, "The Creator's image has arisen." The long text then described the ceremonial meals, the retreat to the nighttime chambers, the processions the next day, and so on. One can reasonably conclude that Ashurbanipal was engaged in collecting, collating, translating, studying all the earlier texts that he could, A, provide guidance to do astronomer priests for detecting at the first possible moment the returning of Nibiru, and B, inform the king about the procedures for what to do next. Calling the planet Planet of the Heavenly Throne is important due to the royal expectations. as were the depictions on palace walls and magnificent reliefs of Assyrian kings greeting the gods in winged discs as it hovered above the tree of life. It was important to be informed of the planet's appearance as soon as possible in order to be able to prepare the proper reception for the arrival of the great god depicted within it, Anu himself, and be blessed with long and perhaps eternal life. But that was not destined to be. Soon after Ashurbanipal's death, rebellions broke out throughout the Assyrian Empire. His son's hold on Egypt, Babylonia, and Elam disintegrated. Newcomers from afar appeared on the borders of the Assyrian Empire. Hordes from the north, Medes from the east. Everywhere, local kings seized control and declared independence. Of particular importance, immediate and for future events, was Babylon decoupling of the dual kingship with Assyria. As part of the New Year festival in 626 BCE, a Babylonian general whose name Nabopolassar, Nabu, his son, protects, implied that he claimed to be a son of the god Nabu, was enthroned as king of independent Babylonia. A tablet described the start of his investiture ceremonies thus: the princes of the land were assembled. They blessed Nabopolassar. Opening their fists, they declared him sovereign. Marduk and the assembly of the gods gave the standard of power to Nabopolassar. The resentment of Assyrian brutal rule was so great that Nabopolassar of Babylon soon found allies for military action against Assyria. A principal and freshly vigorous ally was the Medes, protector of the Persians, who had experienced Assyrian incursions and brutality. While Babylonian troops were advancing into Assyria from the south, the Medes attacked from the east, and in 614 BCE, as had been prophesied by the Hebrew prophets, captured and burnt down Assyria's religious capital, Ashur. The turn of Nineveh, the royal capital, came next. By 612 BCE, the great Assyria was in shambles. Assyria, the land of the first archaeologists, itself became a land of archaeological sites. How could that happen to the land whose very name meant land of the god Ashur? The only explanation at the time was that the gods withdrew their protection from that land. In fact, we shall show where there was much more to it. The gods themselves withdrew from the land and from earth. And then the most astounding and final chapter of the Return saga, in which Haran was to play a key role, began to unfold. The amazing chain of events after the demise of Assyria began with the escape of Haran to members of the Assyrians' royal family. Seeking there the protection of the god Sin, the escapee rallied the remnants of the Assyrian armies and proclaimed one of the royal refugees as the king of Assyria. But the god whose city Haran has been since days of yore did not respond. In 610 BCE, Babylonian troops captured Haran and put an end to the Assyrian lingering hopes. The contest for the mantle of successorship to the heritage of Sumer and Akkad was over. It was now worn solely and with divine blessing by the king in Babylon. Again, Babylon ruled the lands that were once the hallowed Sumer and Akkad, so much so that in many texts from that time, Nabopolassar was given the title King of Akkad. He used that authority to extend the celestial observations to the erstwhile Sumerian cities of Nippur and Uruk, and some of the key observational texts from the subsequent crucial years come from there. It was in that same fateful year, 610 BCE, a memorable year of astounding events, as we shall see, that a reinvigorated Egypt also placed on its throne an assertive strongman named Necho. Just 1 year later, one of the least understood by historians, that is, geopolitical moves, then took place. The Egyptians, who used to be the same side as the Babylonians in opposition to Assyrian rule, emerged from Egypt and, rushing northward, overran territories and sacred sites that the Babylonians considered theirs. The Egyptians advanced all the way north to Karishmesh, put them within striking distance of Haran. It also placed the Egyptian hands the two space-related sites in Lebanon and Judea. The surprised Babylonians were not going to let it stand. The aging Nabopolassar entrusted the task of recapturing the vital places to his son Nebuchadnezzar, who had already distinguished himself on the battlefields. In June 605 BCE, at Karishmesh, the Babylonians crushed the Egyptian army, liberated the sacred forest in Lebanon, which Nabu and Marduk desired, and chased the fleeing Egyptians all the way to the Sinai Peninsula. Nebuchadnezzar stopped the pursuit only on news of Babylon, that his father had died. He rushed back and was proclaimed king of Babylon that same year. Historians find no explanation for the sudden Egyptian thrust and the ferocity of the Babylonian reaction. To us, it is evident that at the core of events was the expectation of the return. Indeed, it seemed that in the year 605 BCE, the return was deemed to be imminent, perhaps even overdue, for it was in that very same year that the prophet Habakkuk began to prophesy in the name of Yahweh in Jerusalem. Uncanny foretelling the future of Babylon and other nations, the prophet asked Yahweh, when the day of the Lord, a day of judgment upon nations, Babylon included, would come, and Yahweh responded, saying, write down the prophecy, explain it clearly on the tablets, so that it may be quickly read. For the vision there is a set time. In the end it shall come, without fail. Though it may tarry, wait for it will surely come. For its appointed time will not be delayed. The appointed time, as we shall see, arrived precisely 50 years thereafter. The 43 years of Nebuchadnezzar, reigned 605-562 BCE, are considered a period of a dominant Neo-Babylon empire, a period marked by decisive actions and fast moves. For there was no time to lose, the nearing return was now Babylon's prize. To prepare Babylon for the expected return, massive renovation and construction works were quickly undertaken. Their focal point were the sacred precincts where the Ishigul temple of Marduk, now simply called Baal, the Lord, was renovated and rebuilt, its seven-stage ziggurat readied for viewing from it the starry sky. Just as had been done in Uruk when Anu had visited circa 4000 BCE, a new processional way leading to the sacred precinct through a massive new gate was erected. Their walls were decorated and covered from top to bottom with artful glazed bricks that astound to this day, for the site's modern excavators have removed and put the processional way and the gate back together at the Vorder-es-Sachs Museum in Berlin. Babylon, Marduk Eternal City, was ready to welcome the return. I have made the city of Babylon to be the foremost among all the countries and every habitation. Its name I elevated to be the most prized of all sacred cities, Nebuchadnezzar wrote in his inscriptions. The expectations, it seemed, was that the arriving god of the winged disc would come down at the landing place in Lebanon, when consummate the return by entering Babylon through the new marvelous processional way and imposing gate, a gate named Ishtar, alias Inanna, who had been Anu's beloved, and Uruk, another clue regarding whose return was expected. Accompanying these expectations was Babylon's role as the new navel of the earth, inheriting the pre-diluvial status of Nippur as the Duranki, the bond heaven-earth. That this was now Babylon's function was expressed by giving the ziggurat's foundation platform the Sumerian name Itimen Anki, temple of foundation of heaven-earth. Stressing Babylon's role as the new navel of the earth, a role clearly depicted on the Babylonian map of the world. This was terminology that echoed the description of Jerusalem, with its foundation stone, serving as a link between heaven and earth. But if that was what Nebuchadnezzar envisioned, then Babylon had to replace the existing post-diluvial space link Jerusalem. Having taken over Nippar's pre-diluvial role to serve as a mission control center after the deluge, Jerusalem was located at the center in concentric distance to the other space-related sites, calling it the navel of the earth. The prophet Ezekiel announced that Jerusalem has been chosen for this role by God himself. Thus has said the Lord Yahweh, "This is Jerusalem. In the midst of the nations I placed her, and all the lands are in a circle round about her." Determined to usurp that role for Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar led his troops to the elusive prize in 598 BCE, captured Jerusalem. This time, the prophet Jeremiah had warned Nebuchadnezzar was carrying out God's anger at Jerusalem's people, for they had taken up the worship of the celestial gods, Baal, the sun and the moon and the constellations. A list that literally include Marduk as a celestial entity. Starving Jerusalem's people by a siege that lasted 3 years, Nebuchadnezzar managed to subdue the city and took the Judean king, Jehoiachin, captive to Babylon. Taking into exile were also Judean nobility and learned elite, among them the prophet Ezekiel and thousands of its soldiers and craftsmen. They were made to reside by the banks of the Kibur River near Hebron, their ancestral home. The city itself and the temple were left intact this time, but 11 years later, in 587 BCE, the Babylonians returned in force. Acting this time according to the Bible on their own volition, the Babylonians put the torch to the temple that Solomon built. In his inscriptions, Nebuchadnezzar offered no explanation other than the usual one, to carry out the wishes and to appease my gods Nabu and Marduk. But as well we shall soon show, the real reason was a simple one, a belief that Yahweh had departed and was gone. The destruction of the temple was a shocking and evil deed for which Babylon and its king, previously deemed by the prophets to have been Yahweh's rod of wrath, were to be severely punished. The vengeance of Yahweh, our God, vengeance for his temple, shall be meted out to Babylon, announced the prophet Jeremiah, predicting the fall of mighty Babylon and its destruction by invaders from the north, events that come true just a few decades later. Jeremiah also proclaimed the fates of the gods whom Nebuchadnezzar had invoked. Declare among the nations and proclaim, raise the sign, announce, do not conceal. Say, captured is Babylon, withered is Bel, confounded is Marduk. Jeremiah 52. Divine punishment upon Nebuchadnezzar himself was commensurate with the sacrilege. Crazed, according to the traditional sources, by a bug that entered his brain through his nose, Nebuchadnezzar died in agony in 562 BCE. Neither Nebuchadnezzar nor his 3 bloodline successors, who were murdered or otherwise disposed of in short shift, lived to see the arrival of Anu at the gates of Babylon. In fact, such an arrival never took place, even though Nibiru did return. It is a fact that the astronomical tablets from the very time recorded actual observations of Nibiru, alas, planet of Marduk. Some were reported as omnia, for the example of the tablet catalog K8688, that informed the king that if Venus shall be seen in the front of Nibiru, the crops will fail, but if Venus shall rise behind or after Nibiru, the crop of the land will succeed. Of greater interest to us are a group of late Babylonian tablets found in Uruk. They rendered the data in 12 monthly zodiacal columns and combined the text with pictorial depictions in one of these tablets. The planet Marduk, shown between the Aries ram symbol on one side and the 7 symbol for Earth on the other, depicts Marduk within the planet. Another example is tablet VAT 7847. It names the actual observation in the constellation of Aries. as the day when the gate of the great Lord Marduk was opened, when Nibiru had appeared into view, and then has an entry day of the Lord Marduk, as the planet moved and was seen in Aquarius. Even more telling, the coming into view of the planet Marduk from the southern skies and its fast becoming Nibiru in the central celestial band were yet another class of tablets, this time circular, representing an advance backward to the Sumerian astronomical tenets. The tablets divided the celestial sphere into the three ways: way of Enlil for the northern skies, of Ea for the southern, and of Anu for the center. The 12 zodiacal calendrical segments were then superimposed on the three ways as shown by the discovered fragments. Explanatory texts were written on the back of those circular tablets. In AD 1900, addressing a meeting of the Royal Ascitic Society in London, England, Theophilus G. Pinches caused a sensation when he announced that he had succeeded in piecing together a complete astrobule taker of stars he called the tablet. He showed it to be a circular disc divided into three concentric sections and, like a pie, into 12 segments, resulting in a field of 36 portions. Each of the 36 portions contained a name, with a small circle below it indicating it was a celestial body and a number. Each portion also bore a month's name, so Pinches numbered them from 1 to 12, starting with Nisan. The presentation caused an understandable sensation, for here was a Babylonian sky map divided into three ways of Enlil, Anu, and Ea, showing which planets, stars, and constellations were observed where at each month during the year. The debate over the identity of the celestial bodies, at the root of which lurks the notion of nothing beyond Saturn, and the meaning of the numbers, has yet to end. Also unresolved is the issue of dating: in what year was the astrobule made, and if it was a copy of an earlier tablet, what was the time shown? Dating opinions range from before the 12th century to the 3rd century BCE. Most agree, however, that the astrobule belonged to the era of Nebuchadnezzar or his successor Nebuenid. The astrolabe presented by Pinches was identified in the ensuing debates as P, but has been later renamed astrolabe A because another one has since been pieced together and it's known as astrolabe B. Though the two astrolabes, at first glance, look identical, they are different, and for our analysis, the key difference is that B, the planet identified as Mul, Nibiru, deity Marduk, planet Nibiru of the god Marduk, is shown in the way of Anu, the central elliptic band, whereas A, the planet identified as Mul, Marduk, the planet of Marduk, is shown in the way of Enlil, in the northern skies. The change in name and position is absolutely correct if the two astrolabes depict a moving planet. Marduk, as it was called by Babylonians after having come into view high in the northern skies, as in A, curves down to cross the elliptic and becomes Nibiru, crossing when it crosses the elliptic in the way of Anu, as in B. The two-stage document by the two astrolabes depicts precisely what we have been asserting all along. The text known as KAV 218, columns B and C, accompany the circular depictions, remove any shadow of doubt regarding the Marduk-Nibiru identity. Month, Adar, planet Marduk and the way of Anu, the radiant Kakabu, which rises in the south after the gods of the night finish their task and divides the heavens. This Kakabu is Nibiru, equal god Marduk. While we can be certain for reasons soon to be given that the observations in all those late Babylonian tablets could not have taken place earlier than 610 BCE, we can also be sure they did not take place after 555 BCE, for that was the date when the one called Nabu-Anu-Id became the last king of Babylonia, and his claim to legitimacy was that his kingship was celestially confirmed because the planet of Marduk high in the sky had called me by my name. Making that claim, he also stated that in a nighttime vision he had seen the great star and the moon. Based on the Kepler formulas, the planetary orbits around the Sun and the whole period of Marduk Nibiru visibility from Mesopotamia lasted just a short few days. Hence, the visibility claimed by Nabuenad placed the planet's return in the years immediately preceding 555 BCE. So, when was the precise time of the return? There is one more aspect involved in resolving the puzzle. The prophecies of darkness at noon. On the day of the Lord, a solar eclipse, and such an eclipse did in fact occur in 556 BCE. Solar eclipse, though much rarer than lunar eclipse, are not uncommon. They happen when the moon, passing in a certain way between the earth and the sun, temporarily obscures the sun. Only a small portion of the solar eclipse are total. The extent, duration, and path of total darkness vary from passage to passage due to the ever-changing triple orbital dance between sun, earth, and moon, plus Earth's daily revolution and its changing axial tilt. As rare as solar eclipses are, the astronomical legacy of Mesopotamia included knowledge of the phenomenon, calling it Atalu Shamashi. Textual references suggest that not only the phenomena, but even a lunar involvement were part of the accumulated ancient knowledge. In fact, a solar eclipse whose path of totality passed over Assyria had occurred in 762 BCE. It was followed by one in 584 BCE that was seen all across the Mediterranean lands with totality over Greece. But then in 556 BCE, there occurred an extraordinary solar eclipse, not in an expected time. It was not due to the predictable motions of the moon. Could it have been caused by an unusually close passage of Nibiru? Among astronomical tablets belonging to a series called When Anu is Planet of the Lord, one tablet cataloged Vak Shamash, dealing with a solar eclipse, recorded thus the observed phenomena. In the beginning, the solar disk, not in an expected time, became darkened and stood in the radiance of the great planet. On day 30 of the month was the eclipse of the sun. What exactly do the words that the darkened sun stood in the radiance of the great planet mean? Though the tablet itself does not provide a date for that eclipse, it is our suggestion that the particular wording highlighted above strongly indicates that the unexpected and extraordinary solar eclipse was somehow caused by the return of Nibiru, the great radiating planet. But whether the direct cause was the planet itself or the effect of its radiance, gravitational, or magnetic pull on the moon, the texts do not explain. Still, it is an astronomically historic fact that on a day equal to May 19, 556 BCE, a major total solar eclipse did occur. As shown by this map prepared by NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center, the eclipse was a great and major one seen over wide areas, and a unique aspect about it was that the band of the total darkness passed exactly over the district of Haran. This last fact is of the utmost significance for the conclusions, and it was even more so in those fateful years in the ancient world, for right after that, in 555 BCE, Nabuenid was proclaimed king of Babylonia, not in Babylon but in Haran. He was the last king of Babylon. After him, Jeremiah had prophesied Babylon followed the fate of Assyria. It was in 556 BCE that the prophesied darkness at noon came. It was just then that Nibiru returned. It was the prophesied day of the Lord. And when the planet return did occur, neither Anu nor any other of the expected gods showed up. Indeed, the opposite happened. The gods, the Anunnaki gods, took off and left the earth.